Howdy folks, Blane Chapman, Vernon, Texas, certified journeyman farrier, formerly from Lubbock, but I made a better move. I'd like to welcome you to the 2021 virtual series from the International Hoof Care Summit, brought to you by the American Farriers Association. The topic of this presentation today that you'll be watching is founder and laminitic shoeing protocols, for lack of a better title. Anyway, what we're going to discuss is there's a lot of things that we can talk about when it comes to shoeing founder and laminitic horses. We can all argue about all sorts of things. The point of this presentation today, sometimes I feel like that shoeing founder and laminitic horses and using heart bar shoes and all the different kinds of protocols that we use are just common knowledge. However, there are people that come in that are still learning that may not have had the opportunities to work on some of these. And so I want to try to touch base on some of the shoes that I've used that worked in certain cases. So anyway, going through that, the first of this is going to have some schematics on what goes on within the hoof capsule. A lot of this we might know, but hopefully these schematics I use will give you a really cool understanding and a good viewpoint from a visual advantage of what goes on within the foot. And we're going to go through the laminitic process on horses that are metabolic, that pretty much if you just get them on a better diet, stabilize their foot a little bit, get them on some medications that might help improve them. Those horses really seem to improve very well. The whole point of this is stabilization of the back of the foot. We're going to go through that. I'm going to walk you through what happens when a horse goes into the acute stages of founder, how I might have utilized different shoes for that particular individual. And I've got a horse that's gone from the early acute phases of laminitis through a whole gamut of things, even a hoof wall resection to where they were roping on him again. So you'll get to see from the start to the finish, the whole gamut, laminitis, acute stages of founder, and on to the success of this one particular horse and how we shot him. So I hope you get something out of it. And so let's get started and with our video. Thank you. Looking at a cross-section of the hoof wall, we will begin to point out what is happening inside the lamina region, looking at the normal region in gray to the left, primary lamina, that's the long gray part, and the short spiky edges representing the secondary lamina in the normal blood vein in blue and the artery being in red. We will be showing what takes place within a single region of one of about 600 primary lamina and one secondary structure. In this schematic, we have normal blood perfusion of the hoof. As this returns to the circulatory system to continue the normal perfusion of blood flow and nutrients for normal, healthy hoof growth and function. If you'll notice the blood flow from the red artery coming in and going into the circulatory system, it perfuses in and out of the system. The brown background will represent the connection of the laminar structures from the parietal surface of the bone and the healthy hoof capsular lamina, respectively. The glass encompassing the venous plexus will be referred to as the interstitial space, which is the area that lays between the primary and secondary laminar attachments, all the way around the foot. The circular region to the left, where the blood flow is the glass border, at that point of perfusion, the vein in blue and the artery in red. The yellow areas represent a soaker hose effects, which takes place in normal blood protein plasma perfusion and nutrients that flow freely and easily into the region to provide nutrients to the foot. This is a normal situation. You have normal perfusion that goes in and out of the interstitial space all throughout the foot as it goes back and forth into the circulatory system. We're all aware of what takes place when a horse starts to develop laminitis or even acute stages of founder. They start to develop things within their hoof capsule, begin to change, and you can see this by the makeup of the horse, their stance and what. And at this point, the blood flow inside the foot is transitioning from the normal and beginning to increase in pressure within the laminar bed. As the blood plasma flow into the interstitial space at a rapid rate, the venous system cannot resorb the blood plasma at a rate of equilibrium, and the space begins to fill with fluid, causing inflammation throughout the laminar region, and that's where you start to see the soreness, and that's in the laminar region of the foot. The vein shuts down, and the AVAs, or the arterial venous anastomoses, open up, and the blood flow is shut off to the distal end of the laminar capillary bed, causing ultimate death of the laminar region. And you can see as it goes into the perfusion of this schematic, you can see as the interstitial space starts to fill up with blood plasma more and more and more, and it cannot be equilibrium. This is pretty much what's starting to happen within the foot. The changes in the bony column alignment more than likely will be normal radiographically. You won't see a lot of radiographic changes at this point. However, these schematics will show the changes that internally what is taking place within the foot within the first 24 to 48 hours at the onset.
Pulling. A little harder. Keep pulling.
This is a point most metabolic horses will represent lameness in respect to blood circulation will be compromised. These are metabolic horses that probably overeat, eat too much grass. These are not too difficult to fix. Generally, most metabolic horses will respond well with mechanical support, medications. These will include NSAIDs like butazolidine, insulin and cortisol regulators that will usually help these in a good strict diet. And that's the biggest thing. Get them off a bunch of feed. They're too fat. Most laminitics and foundered horses will not present abnormal presentation in the first few weeks, although radiographically they may. This is just a schematic of kind of what it looks like inside the foot. It's pretty much a normal situation in these early onsets. You might see a little inflammation in the laminar region. You might see a little bit of change, but not a lot as far as rotation goes. Most metabolic and laminitic horses respond very well and very quickly with simple frog and caudal support, a plastic frog support pad, a Myron McLean pad, heart bar shoes. These generally work pretty well. They're kind of a household. This is pretty common knowledge. I mean, it's not like most of us don't know that a heart bar shoe will generally have an immediate positive effects toward comfort and soundness on these acutely laminitic horses until they start going into a little heavier stage of founder. These shoes can have a welded frog support, whatever your choice may be, as long as they have a solid and have stability so that they remain static when placed on the foot, providing positive support during resting and loading phases. And sometimes your urethane products may not give you as much support when they're not loaded, but they work really well on laminitic horses that are just at the onset, these metabolic type horses. Utilizing as much of the frog surface will achieve the best result, and hot fitting if possible will give you a clear view of the surface contact that you get with your support bar. It's very important to utilize as much of the frog, as much of the back of the foot as you can. I'm really big on utilizing not only the frog support, but other materials to help support the entire back of the foot. These horses also respond well, like I say, with fillers such as equithane or any kind of pouring urethane products. You can use impression material. I do recommend a lot of caudal support. I think that's key, and you'll find that throughout this presentation. How do we do that? How do we make that? By making and placing your bar in the shoe, it is important to measure and properly mark the direction the frog is pointing in the hoof itself. And a great rule of thumb of placement of the tip of the support bar to be placed back 3/8 of an inch back from the true apex of the frog to maximize the effects of the support mechanism in the shoe. I think as long as you really get a good coverage of your frog and you can support your frog well, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape. As you see here, natural approaches have been tried. However, generally they fail due to natural selection. I'm only kidding. I'm just kidding. Don't somebody jump out of the computer and get us here. That's just kind of an interesting frog support there that I found in the bottom of a horse's foot one time. And when it comes to radiographs, we're going to try to stick to the subject of what kind of shoes we're putting on there. Radiographs are a very important tool to find and help normal and abnormal incidents that are happening within the foot. We don't always have the opportunity to get an X-ray if we're out in the field. I mean, it's great to have. So there are times when radiographs may not be available. In this instance, we have to make a decision to shoe the horse without the use of radiographs. And a lot of times we already know what's going on. We can kind of tell. In this case, a properly applied shoe with minimal frog support and caudal support will give the horse some relief. And you should continue to closely evaluate those horses until they can get them to a vet clinic somewhere and get some radiographs and get some anti-inflammatory drugs on board. Sometimes we don't have the shoes. We're not really available. We just have to do some first aid. So if there's a concern, question, or you're not experienced, or you feel qualified to make a modified shoe applications that are needed, these feet can be wrapped heavily with heavy cotton rolls, heavy-duty duct tape, baby diapers, gorilla tape, duct tape, until this horse can be seen by a more experienced practitioner. I think that a veterinarian is helpful, but a horseshoer is ultimately the one that's going to be able to get you the mechanics you need in the horse that they need. And the radiographs from a veterinarian and maybe some anti-inflammatories will help. When these horses move from a metabolic type laminitis and they get off feed and whatnot and what have you, and they run into the acute stages of founder, then we will see differences in physical appearance, and there will be radiographic differences. Usually you'll be able to tell when a horse is getting along as poorly as this horse is. There will be radiographic changes within the foot, and you'll start to see differences at the coronary band and whatnot and what have you. These horses are still extremely sore. They take on that classic founder laminitic look. I'd suggest do not give up on them too soon. The process takes time. You'll see little subtle changes that you have to observe. Some examples of that can be they stand up longer. They have a softer look in their eye. They may be more relaxed in their muscles in their neck, even in their jawline. They'll look more alert. Their ears will be forward. They'll show signs of progress just a little bit at a time. They'll still be off and still be unsound, but you'll start to see subtle changes in these horses. At this stage, the insult can be a number of causes. Overeating, increased body temperature due to sickness, exhaustion, fatigue, stress. There's just a few things that trigger founder and laminitis. There's many of them. Those things really they're important, but they're really not important in fixing the problem. If their gut's still in bad shape, that has to be directed by a vet. But we're talking about the mechanical process at the moment. At this stage, we still have semi-normal perfusion of blood in the primary and secondary laminar region. However, if you notice the blood vein in blue, like we talked about earlier, on this schematic, it is beginning to shut down and collapse due to the influx of blood flowing too rapidly back into the body to keep up with the pressure from the arterial blood flow in red and the plasma entering the interstitial space noted by the glass-like membrane surrounding the single laminar structure in this schematic. Note, this is happening to the circumference of the foot in the laminar region, creating internal pressure throughout the foot and ultimately breaks down of the bonded surfaces, structures that hold the hoof capsule and the laminar region together, integrating the hoof capsule and bone. You'll see as it starts to soak, and you'll see the vein in blue start to shut down. At this point, you can note the arrowed yellow venous structure, which is indicated in this schematic, the total constriction of blood flow to the laminar region, and the venous blood in red has now been routed through the bridges between the artery and vein, known as the arteriovenous anastomosis. It's just a bridge between the veins is all it is. At this stage, the depletion of blood to the secondary lamina causes the bond of primary lamina to the bone to break down and lose its tensile strength, and the bone is no longer suspended by the laminar region 100%. This is what happens. As the blood plasma and liquid that could not be resorbed normally and fed back into the blood circulatory system, we have leftover hemorrhage and hematoma, and blood plasma seen in red to the far left of this image, resulting in a subungual hematoma, which will show up in time as a dark line or seroma on a radiograph from the coronary band distally between the hoof wall and the parietal surface of the bone. This is where you'll see the seroma. As noted in red, the brown-colored hoof region and the coffin bone, that's where your inflammation will be in the schematic. Of course, pretty understandable. Most people know this already. It's not a big hoorah effect, but this schematic shows what it appears to be like beneath the hoof capsule and between the bone. You'll have that influx of bone. That's when you'll start to see a seroma. As we look at radiographs, it's one thing that's very important to note is the alignment of P1, P2, and P3. It is paramount in the prognosis of these individuals regardless of their level of soundness today. And furthermore, the dorsal wall in this one, which has been removed in this photo, will not indicate rotation. It does, however, indicate how much hoof capsular distortion there has been as a result of the breakdown of the internal components of the lamina. This horse had a really bad hoof capsular proximally migrating up. So now that we know what's happened inside the foot, how do we decide which shoes to use and why do we use them? I mean, I know that there's many different ideas on shoeing laminitic and founder horses, and we could talk for hours and hours and hours on the subject. However, all the shoes that we choose have one thing in common that is paramount to their success, and I believe this. Anything that you use, they must utilize stabilizing the back of the foot. Without stabilizing the back half of the foot, most of these applications, they fall way short of success. And if you truly have a foundered or severe laminitic situation, that for sure. You've got to, no matter what you do, you've got to have stabilization to the frog and the back half of the foot. That's the only way they work. Now that we've revisited the stages of founder laminitis, we know what the issue is. But how do we shoe them? I know from personal experience there are many ways to accomplish the same goal, especially with shoe selection. I can say I've tried almost all the different ways, conventional and non-conventional. The horses in this presentation, specifically the gray or white gelding, has had a variety of shoes based on his stage and recovery process. So everyone has their success and failure stories, I know, including me, using the different techniques shown and not shown here. With that being said, I'll walk through the stages and the applications and why they were chosen for this particular individual. You can use glue-ons, you can use all kinds of different methods. These are not ones I use, they're just showing you some different methods that you may like to use. We'll start with basically the early onset of laminitis. At the early stages, we see the classic founder stance and movement. To me, we can really go overboard thinking about rotation and all the extra worries about the mechanics in this particular stage. I'm not saying they're not important. Trim the foot properly, protect it and support it. The foot will be thin-soled or distorted. However, most normal presentation, a basic heart bar or frog support shoe of some sort will be sufficient. From a mechanical standpoint, many times on laminitic cases, we get great results with heart bar shoes, frog support, or even a simple pour-in pad. I like to use in these cases a McLean frog support pad, any kind of frog support pad if you will. They usually work pretty well. As these cases become more complex and move into the acute stages of founder, we must consider the factors which include support first and foremost and protection of the foot. The foot will generally give you the answers without question. This is where most of us give up and start talking about euthanasia and a gamut of things concerning the horse's future. In this 40-plus minute presentation, 20 minutes, however long it is, we'll want to focus on shoe selection. That's what we're going to try to do today. This is a huge topic in a huge area, and so we're going to try to focus on the shoes and what we're going to utilize for founder and laminitic horses in this particular individual. We'll use my great buddy Vegas here. May he rest in peace, and to show you the shoe selections at different stages in his recovery to hopefully give us some idea of the insight on the ways to package these cases so they can continue to progress and recover. Man, he was a sore booger right here when I saw him. He couldn't even hardly walk. And this is the early stages. And early on, we used a heart bar shoe with a hospital or treatment plate for support and protection. This gave him the ability to treat any open or infantile cavities or abscesses when the sole. We added impression material and soft sole packing like magic cushion, Forstner's, hoof packing, or any other soft packing that you choose from the apex of the frog forward. A quick note, Clogs seem to work very well in laminitic cases or when there's no exposed tissue to be treated. However, when the foot needs attention, they may be difficult to help monitor the solar surface in that region and medicate them. So as these horses come into the third and fourth reset, the sole goes through some dramatic changes from open exposed solar cordon or epidermal layer covering the coffin bone, if you will. The foot will always recover from the back or the heel of the foot forward. That is why the sole is the last to completely fill in and heal, and it must be protected. This horse was at a pretty sticky situation. We had to really design a shoe to be able to accommodate this bone protruding out of the bottom of his foot. It actually wasn't the bone itself, it was just how it was growing out. As the recovery process begins, the foot actually goes through a process where it seems to get worse before it gets better, because once when the foot starts to grow, the sole begins to slough off and there's a new infantile sole growing underneath, and there'll be a lot of hemorrhage and hematoma and damage underneath that sole. So once again, this is the Vegas sole with the prolapsed sole. His hoof capsule moved proximally, more so than the bone rotating down. The bone does move, however, but it's just because the hoof capsule has been unattached and it's really unstable at that point. It's pretty difficult to appreciate these two photos because they're so blurry, but the one on the left is about 7 weeks after the one on the right where we had the prolapsed sole, and I was even amazed at how good that sole recovered and how much it grew out. And so at that point we were faced with the challenge of how to relieve the pressure from the sole when putting the shoe back on his foot. I mean, yeah, you could glue it, but this it's been several years back, and you know, it was the way we did it, and we had to just create some space away from the sole, and you can appreciate the growth at the heel. And you look at this picture as it's beginning to recover. Once again, recovery can take some time, and it's the smallest changes that we need to look for. Now, I don't like to keep these horses confined if possible, as long as they have good shelter, a soft place to lay down. When you have a longer term recumbent type horse, peat moss works really great for bedding alternative. Though it's pretty expensive, you can you'll have almost no bed sores or no pressure sores from laying down with peat moss. When these horses get to becoming more mobile day in and day out, first thing, you always have to have a good dog to help keep them moving. That's always good to get a foundered horse going, is a good dog. You can often go to a support shoe with pouring packing or a pad, impression material or magic cushion, Forstners, or any soft fillers. This was the first time this horse had been ridden in about 8 months, and I thought he was going to buck me off. Anyway, the foot's coming along great now. We have a new sole that's starting to come in. It's still a long ways from being ready, but we have a lot of positive growth and a lot of positive things starting to happen within the foot. Here it is as it's grown out a little bit more. It's probably about 8.5 months. We got a shoe on him that can protect the bottom of his sole, keep his foot short. This is a shoe that I just bradded a steel plate to the bottom and on the flat surface. I like this shoe because it gives me a lot of medial lateral relief, and it takes a lot of pressure off of his coffin joint. The residual effects of this disease, we're dealing with a lot of pedal osteitis. In most cases, that's where the P3 or third phalanx has been remodeled. These shoes take a lot of pressure. As you can see, the importance of sole protection on these particular horses. I bradded a frog support plate in this one and welded an aluminum plate to the bottom of his foot. So here he is from the start when we first saw him, and we had to shoe him with the hospital plate, frog support. You've got to have frog support no matter what shoe you use. We use a lot of impression material in the back part of his foot as well. Throughout the process early on, this horse probably wouldn't have done well in a clog early on. I think later on you might have been able to put one on him, and we did have one on him actually for a short term after his hoof wall sole recovered. But here he is as he just continues on his path of getting better. This horse turned out he wasn't on a lot of anti-inflammatories, and here he is 10 months later. First time he had been, they'd sent him to the swimming pool and he'd been swam, got back in shape, began to ride him. At this point he's got that aluminum shoe with the plate welded in the bottom of it with some impression material in the back and magic cushion in the toe just to protect his sole. And this is the first years that he had run on him after that. So this is Turtle Pal's Great Horse Vegas. Vegas was the 2010 AQHA Head Horse of the Year. He was sidelined to acute founder from salmonella early in 2011. He didn't get to compete. Later in the mid-summer of 2011, and we started working on him, and we worked on him throughout the year. He went back to the National Finals Rodeo in 2012, where he actually won the Reno Rodeo in 2012 on him, and he actually won 2 rounds. Only 2 rounds he rode him at the National Finals Rodeo in 2012, and he won both rounds. I dedicate this video and this presentation to Vegas. You can see where we had done the hoof wall resection in this radiograph. That's a totally different presentation at a different time. I just wanted to let you know that, in this, that we did do that. There was a lot of issues going on within the hoof capsule, so we did choose to do a hoof wall resection. There are some of the pictures that might have shown that with this horse where you could kind of see it. But anyway, that's a different subject at a different time, and it was... he did recover well. He was the only horse I'd ever seen. He walked backwards at first. He was so crippled on the front end. He would lean up against the back of the stall, kick his front end around, move his back end over, and do it again. Now, these are just one. This horse was a sinker, really, really, really bad shape. He didn't end up making it, but sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Wow, check out this anvil. I've got the coolest father-in-law of all time. He actually took this, was one of my first anvils when I left to go to college. I bought it for $100 at a horse sale. I redid it. This is the original Acme anvil. It was an anvil that I used for 10 years, first 10 years whenever I left to go to college after I got out. And I love this anvil, and I kind of retired it, and so he painted it up for me, and it's really cool. He got Acme, and this is about the way I feel like the Roadrunner and the Coyote whenever I'm talking about founder and limited courses. So you open up a can of worms whenever you choose this subject. Why I did, I don't know. But I hope each and every one of you got something out of it. And there are still some questions left. I can look back and there's some things that I would like to have said different and maybe touched on a little more. However, I hope that from this video, some of you got something that you can take back with you and that you can utilize. And I expect you to question some of the things that were done, some of the ways that we did it. And if you want to shoot those questions to Jeff Coda at the AFJ and the American Farriers Journal, shoot them to him, he'll get them back to me. I hope there's some way that I can answer those questions for you. And last but not least, I want to thank Jeff Coda, the American Farriers Journal, Frank Lassiter, the International Hoof Care Summit, and some of my sponsors here, Stonewell Bodies, for the last 20 years of service. You want to take a look at how a trailer's supposed to look like when you use it. Step around here and let's see. This is 20 years of service. So I welcome any sponsorships, hoof care products, nails, whoever you are. If you want me to use your products, endorse your products, pick me. This is the actual virtual glass door on the side of an original Stonewall trailer with 20 years of service. So I appreciate you. Thanks. I hope you got something out of it. Keep shoeing. Nail them on. Thank you.